I'm going to start it with the welcome to Dare to be Vital with Allan Mishra. This is Mark Gill, and I actually looked you up a little bit on the internet database, so I have to read your awesome bio. President and CEO of Solstice Studios, former president at Miramax, Warner Independent Films and Millennium Films, and has also worked on films that have grossed over $2 billion, including Pulp Fiction, Shakespeare in Love, Chicago, and many others. I'm very happy to also call Mark Gill my friend. So thank you for spending a few minutes. And what we're trying to do with these short interviews is to kind of discuss how is it possible to thrive, not just survive during the coronavirus crisis. So maybe what are you doing personally? And then what are you doing in the context of your business roles?
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Allan. Good to see you. I guess 3 or 4 things. I've always been a runner, and so far you can still do that in California. So I get up and go every morning, and that is useful in any time, but is really essential when you're stuck at home and you don't have the opportunity to go down the hall and talk to people so much. You can definitely be accused of that new disease, sitting is the new smoking.
Right.
And so it really helps to get up and about. The other thing I've really tried to do is take a 5-minute break every couple of hours and at least run up and down the stairs or do something to get my heart rate up. Some people do jumping jacks. I can't do cartwheels. I don't know. But whatever it is that gets your heart rate up a little bit, that seems to make a massive difference. And these obviously are helpful physically, but they're really helpful mentally. But so much of this is about trying to stay somewhat closer to the present as opposed to wallowing in the past, which is depressing, or fearful for the future, which is anxiety producing. And why am I both? So,
Right.
But it's a really good way to try to just do what you can. So, we think a lot about, or I do anyway, about the circle of control, followed by the circle of influence, followed by the circle of vision. And, I can see a lot of things I can't do anything about. I can see some things I have some influence over. And then I'm trying to focus mostly on the things that I have control over. So that's exercise, diet, regular schedule, more sleep than usual, under the theory that that'll probably help you stay healthy in the event that you have some immune concerns or anything else. And beyond that, just trying to, as much as possible, help people wherever you can, because of course that feels good and it definitely keeps you in the moment.
Yeah, well, those are awesome. So I really think those are similar to other things that people are trying to lean into, and that is to see what you can do in your house, taking a lap around your house, finding whatever exercise equipment you might have in the garage or in a closet, and utilizing that. And sleep is crucial. So if you look at sleep in your immune system, it's absolutely, hey, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome. Anyway, so I was thinking sleep is something that we may have a little bit more time to focus on. So, a lot of people are asking how you can sleep better, and that's creating a better environment or working on things like you do to run to relieve some tension. That can be helpful. What I've also been worried about and thinking a lot about is how do you stay connected? And I think the new video technology, we're using Zoom right now, but a lot of them are available, is fascinatingly important. Because you can pick up the phone or text or send an email, but actually the visual medium, which you're an expert in, I think is ridiculously important in terms of maintaining some sort of social connectivity. And I'd love to hear what you think about it.
I don't think there's any question about that. I've seen it just in the last 2 weeks. We certainly, the old saying was, if you really want to get anything done, you can never replace a handshake. Well, can't have a handshake right now, so we can't replace that. But second best and much better than a phone call is, in fact, the video call. And it seems like there's a lot of reasons for that. The main one is you just pick up so many visual cues that help you get comfortable, and particularly at this time when people are really pretty full of goodwill and trying to help each other. That really matters. And also I've experienced a couple of times when I've been on a call with somebody and I couldn't quite tell it from their voice, but I could sure tell it when I saw them. They really needed more help than they were saying they needed. And I would not have guessed that if we'd just been on the phone. So that's really valuable. But just in terms of sort of human connection, we are sort of have adapted to be social animals, and without it, we're in trouble. So it really matters. And, I guess the thing I would say more than anything else is, in the movie business, we always say, that seeing is believing, and that everything else is mistrusted. You can tell me a movie's great all you want. Please show me.
Right.
And I think that applies to this as well, which is, show me the other person's face, or show me 8 people on a call, or what have you. It still works. When there's 40 people on a call, it starts to be like the Brady Bunch. But under about 8 or 10 people, I think it's really valuable.
That's a really important point, Mark. And actually, I hadn't thought about that, but the people may say something to you like, "I'm okay. I'm not gonna act in front of Mark Gill."
Yeah.
But they may say, "Oh, I'm okay," and yet you can tell by looking at them that they're really not okay. So they could send you a text and say that, and you'd have to sort of believe them at face value. But if you can hear their voice, you get a little inflection. But if you can hear their voice and see them, you might be able to intervene with that family member or that friend or that person that you just reached out to and say, "Wow, let's have a more extended conversation. Let's figure out how we can help you." So that's a massively important point. Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was good. Also, the opposite's true, which is you can get relief. My mother's 82, and I worry about her a little bit. She's staying as she should alone. And I saw her on a video chat the other night, and she's all smiley and happy and looks very healthy. I'm like, okay, that's a relief, as opposed to I'm fine on the phone. Oh, really? How do I know?
Right. Well, your mom's a vigorous 82-year-old. I've known her for a long time, and I can tell she's a very vigorous 82-year-old. And I'm sure say hello to her next time you talk to her.
But it's a relief. It's a relief, just to see people who you care about, who you can very obviously see are still doing well.
Right. So one thing we have to thank you for, and your colleagues and your massive infrastructure around the entertainment industry, is a lot of us are keeping occupied by streaming video of different formats, and we're worried you're going to run out of content because we're exhausting our end of our Netflix or Amazon Prime. But can you help us take us through what's going on? I mean, are productions completely shut down? Are people still writing things, or what's happening in your world?
Right. So all productions are shut down. We had to shut down a movie that stars Ben Affleck 7 weeks before it was supposed to start. But had we been shooting, we would have had to shut it down. We had another film starring Russell Crowe that was in post-production editing, and I had to shut the editing room. So everything is shut. The only things you can do there is some remote visual effects work being done. The lawyers are still working, and the writers are still writing. That's about it. Everything else is stopped. So the hope is that once we get past the really dark stages and start to return to a better place, that there will have been a lot of writing done in between now and then, and that will mean there are more scripts ready to go film. But there's at least a 3-month pause, and that is working from the premise that there's no time to have to get back up and running. So I think it will feel more like a 4-month gap in how much entertainment is out there at an absolute bare minimum. And then, if things last longer, or we have more struggles with trying to figure out how to deal with allowing people to work together in a large group, like 50 or 100 people in one soundstage, then it gets harder.
So I don't know, maybe you can tell me if this is mythology or not, but I heard that Frankenstein was written during a crazy, cold summer back in the early 1800s by Mary Shelley, and she was holed up in a castle or something with Lord Byron and a bunch of other people. First of all, is that true? And then is there anything you would say to aspiring writers out there who might have a little more time on their hands to come up with the next Frankenstein?
Sure. Well, having not been around in the 1800s, I'm old, but I'm not that old. It appears to be true. People say it is true. For me, the slightly two more interesting ones are Shakespeare, of course, did a lot of writing during the plagues. He got absolutely no support from Queen Elizabeth, but wrote anyway. And Sir Isaac Newton, I think, invented a fair number of interesting pieces of science in that period. So look, if you have the time, that's a blessing. If you aren't doing something that really fully engages you, you're really missing out, because that's one of the ways you can stop worrying about whatever's on the news. So it's actually, not only do you have the time, but it's going to help you mentally, and you'll get something out of it. So this is the best time ever to do that. And nobody's distracting you saying you're late for dinner, or you have to go to this, you have to go there. You got nowhere to go.
Right.
Right. You can't do it 15 hours a day. That's probably not going to be healthy. But let's imagine that you said, I'm going to devote 4 or 5 or 6 hours a day to that. You can do a lot over a few months in 4 or 5 or 6 hours a day.
Right. No, it's fascinating. So this little discussion that I started just a week ago came out when I was walking around the Stanford Dish which you might have done with Jay or at some point. And I said, how can I potentially help? I've a little bit been put on ice as an orthopedic surgeon. I may be put to use in the ER or maybe even in the ICU if things get really bad. But I said, well, wait a minute. I could reach out to people like yourself and others and just ask them some questions. And it's been awesome. It's been so thank you, first of all.
Sure.
I have a secondary question, though, and that is related to something that we're doing right now. Do you think platforms, and maybe this is a loaded question for you, because do you think platforms like Zoom or others might disrupt how TV or even film productions are going to go? Okay, so there's a lot of maybe crazy people like me starting to create content that may or may not have value, but is that going to maybe birth a different group of people who think they can use this medium in a different way?
It certainly will, and the younger they are, the more likely they'll be able to do something really fascinating with it, because that's just what they've kind of grown up with to begin with. They're more adept at it. The issue really is one of quality. There will always be some people who can take something like this and make something of high quality that others will want to spend their time and or their money on. But most what we call user-generated content is that, and not be called premium content. You see the rise of podcasts, you see the rise of obviously YouTube and so on. So there's a place for it for sure. Does it displace what I'll describe as premium content or professionally made storytelling? No, but it might be additive, and it might take a small little chunk out of it in the same way that Quibi might take a little chunk out of us, or HBO takes a little chunk out of movies, and so on and so on. There's all these different ways that people can get entertained now, and you certainly feel the pressure to have to be better because otherwise nobody's watching. But it won't knock any one format out.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to just finish with a couple of quick questions of, are you listening to any podcasts that are interesting, or are there any really awesome books that you might have read that we could recommend for people out there who are looking for things to do in addition to movies? And then I have to finish up with maybe an added question of, really loaded, what in the movies that you worked on have you watched again, or do you recommend watching again? So.
Yeah, sure. Fair enough. Well, let's start with podcasts. I have had a pretty rocky ride this last couple of weeks. I run a business that doesn't have that many people in it, but there are 56 of us, and people have needed a lot more attention and emotional support and communication and reassurance and guidance than normal. Partly because we're trying to do a bunch of things for the first time, like all work remotely, partly because it seems like, not one day at a time, but 1 hour at a time, things are changing so fast. Every 3 days is a whole new paradigm, whereas it used to be every 5 years. So some of it's that. And then part of it also has been that I have actually just been a fair amount of busy trying to finish up one movie that we could finish up remotely. So I have not listened to a single podcast, which I regret, but I hope to once things get a little calmer. The second question was books. I don't know that there's anything that I have read just now that would be great, but let me just think for a second if there's anything that I've read in the last few months or year that would be particularly interesting.
Perhaps even salient to the time right now.
Yeah, well, there's a book that actually is really pertinent for now, which is called Happiness at Work. And it's written by a professor, I can't remember, University of Chicago, perhaps, I'm not sure. But it actually is, happiness anywhere is pretty much what it would be, right? Like things you can do to feel happier when you're doing something that requires a sense of purpose. So, that could be a hobby or whatever it is. So I found that to be unbelievably. The other book is a book called Peak, which is written by a Florida State professor and later sort of co-opted by Malcolm Gladwell. This is the old 10,000 hours theory.
Right.
That's all. This originally comes from this gentleman who's an academic, and that's an amazing book about just how to get better at anything. And we have the time now. Mastery requires the time and the repetition and so on. So those would be two I'd recommend.
Awesome. Finish with a couple movies that you would recommend, and then we'll let you go. But thank you so much. Escapist, maybe something where we can not. I don't want to hear any. You didn't work any of the pandemic movies, did you?
I have not done Contagion or anything like it. Sorry to say. So no. Escapist movies. It's fascinating right now is people are watching two kinds of movies. It seems they're watching a little of everything, but the places that are the outliers or where you're seeing the most tune in are for sort of classic romance. So, Bridget Jones's Diary or that sort of thing, which is great. And on the other hand, for very intense thrillers. That I would not have expected. And I guess what that is people just are looking for anything that fully involves them. And that makes sense, right? We always want something that's either the most romantic or the most hilarious or the most exciting or what have you. And right now, probably what we need is either the most reassuring or the most gripping, so I just forget everything else. So that seems to be what people are enjoying. It's very hard to obviously recommend one movie for anybody, but the thing that I have noticed that Steven Spielberg has started doing as of today is the AFI Top 100 Films, and I believe that they're being webcast. And even if they're not, the list is readily available on the internet, and you pick just about any one of those, and you've got a great movie.
Mark Gill, great suggestions. Thank you for spending some time with us, and really look forward to seeing you again in person.
Yes.
Thank you for your